Hello, and welcome to the next in our series of student success workshops, Have Fun and Get Work Done. My name is Sarah Troganing, and I'm the Student Accessibility and Success Advisor here at Augustana campus. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which Augustana campus is located, traditionally known as Assiniskosepieces or Stony Creek, is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples. It provided a traveling route and home to the Maskwacis Nehiyawak, Niitsitapi, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations, the Métis, and other indigenous peoples. Their spiritual and practical relationships to the land create a rich heritage for our learning and our life as a community. As we begin, I want you to think about the things in your life that take the most time. We're going to play the game, How Many Years of Your Life? So when you think over a course of a lifetime, so up to 80 years, for example, how many years of your life do you think you're going to spend doing the most activities? Which activities will take the most time? Well, most of you will probably think of this, but the number one way we spend our time is sleeping, about 26 years of our life sleeping. Number two may be surprising, but it's actually watching TV. The average person spends 11 years watching television. These are North American averages, I should stress. Number three is working. We'll spend 10.3 years of our lives working. Now, if you added in the time you spend as a student, if you think of being a student as your job, that number would increase and it would actually add up to more than watching television. Number four is shopping. You'll spend 8 years of your life shopping. Trying to sleep. This is the one that everyone forgets. So we're going to spend on average 7 years of our lives trying to fall asleep. That time when you're lying there thinking, if I fall asleep now, I can sleep for 7 hours. Okay, if I fall asleep now, I can sleep for 6.5 hours. That takes up 7 years of our life. Number six, social media. Now, these are averages as of a year ago. So it may actually increase during the pandemic as we're all trapped inside more and less able to do other activities. Number seven is surfing online. So spending time on the internet, whether it's YouTube, video games, shopping, whatever that may be. Driving will take up 4.3 of our years of our lives, and that may be you in your own car or it could be through public transit. But that's years of your life you spent just going from point A to point B. Eating, we'll spend actually less time eating than we do driving. And finally, cooking, 2.5 years of our lives. Now, there are gender differences in this. Women spend a lot more time cleaning. If we did this by gender, cleaning would be in the top 10 activities for women, but it would not make the top 10 for men. And of course, we haven't included childcare here, but these are the big activities on average. So if you think of that time and how some things you need to spend time on, like sleep and eating, these are good things. But other things like watching TV, social media, being online, sometimes those things limit how effectively we manage our time. So today we're going to talk about different tools you can use to manage your time effectively. Those are prioritization tools, planning tools, and application tools. So, why bother managing your time? Well, studies show that successful students spend more time planning and organizing their learning. So, a successful student, when they go to sit down to start studying, they don't just sit down and then crack open their books. They've got a plan for what they're going to do while they're sitting there, and they've organized how they're going to get their work done. And that leads to greater success as a student. It's also because not having a plan is more like wishing and hoping. So if you say, oh, I want to get straight A's this semester, but you don't have a plan for how you're going to get straight A's, it's more like buying a lottery ticket where you're just hoping it happens. You haven't come up with a way of getting it done. You also plan so you can avoid worry and frustration. You know the stress of an upcoming deadline, so a major assignment or an exam when you haven't got it figured out, you don't know what you're going to do or how you're going to get everything done. If you have a plan, you can cut down on a lot of that stress. There will still be some, but not to the overwhelming point. Also, if you know what you're doing when, it's easier to get it done. So if you know, okay, between 2 and 5 this afternoon, I'm going to be spending an hour doing my reading for this course. I'm going to spend 30 minutes writing questions that come out of the reading. I'm going to spend 30 minutes reviewing the video for this class. You know what's happening when, and you can tell that you've made progress. So, one of the big things to think about is setting your goals, and these are big picture goals. Oh, this slide does not like to behave. So, what is your goal for the semester? Be specific and write it down. So, if your goal for the semester is to get straight A's, okay, write that down. When you're thinking about setting goals, it's always better to set them as something that is personal to you. So, something that doesn't rely on external factors like the grade your professor is going to give you. If you have more personal motivation, like I want to learn this by the end of the semester, your chance of success increases because it depends only on you and not on others. Um, yep, it's just going wild here. So, next, you need to make the detailed plan. What do you need to do in order to achieve that goal you have for the semester? And finally, what is your deadline for achieving it? You need to map out when you need to complete each task in order to meet your deadline. That's what we're going to look at today. So, one of the things you can use to help do that is prioritization tools. So, priority setting 101. Well, first of all, let's figure out what do we mean by the word priority? Priority means something given or meriting attention before competing alternatives. So that means this is the thing that is the most important and that has to be dealt with first before we can move on to other things. Now, it's important to know that priority originally was a singular noun, so it applied to only one thing. But starting in the 1900s, it was being used as a plural, meaning that many things were priorities. Now, the problem with that is that when you go from having one thing that's a priority to having five things that are a priority, it almost means that nothing is a priority. Nothing is the first thing you need to get done before moving on to other things. And so you really want to think about what you're deciding is a priority. You don't want to have too many competing because then it's hard to choose how to get started. So let's look at an example. Imagine you have the following list of things to do. So these are assignments, they could be in different classes. You've got a research paper that's supposed to be 15 pages long. That's due in 2 weeks, and it's worth 25% of your grade. You've also got a midterm exam that's going to be happening in 2 days, and that's worth 15%. You've got a chapter quiz, that's tomorrow, and that's only worth 2%. And then finally, you've got a reflection, so just a 500-word assignment, and that's due Tuesday. So let's say 5 days from now, and that's worth 10%. How do you decide which to do first and which to do later? What would you set as your priority? Now, when I've asked students, 60% of them said the chapter quiz was the priority because it was due tomorrow. However, 40% said actually studying for the midterm was the priority. And when I asked them why, they said the midterm was the priority because it's in only 2 days and it's worth 15%. So when you decide priorities, there are many ways you can choose them. You can look at how much work each one requires. You can look at the value of the work and the timeline. These are usually the most important factors when we decide how to set a priority. So, one thing we can use is the priority matrix. This is a matrix that looks at how important is the task and how urgent is the task. So, this is how you decide which to do first, which to do next, which to do later if you even need to, and which to not bother doing. So, if we look at our example of the four different assignments, well, the research paper, that's worth the most. It's worth 25%, but it's also the last one due. It's not due for another 2 weeks. However, you know that in order to complete a research essay, that's not something you can write at the last minute. There are steps that you're going to have to take in order to complete it. Now, the midterm that's in 2 days, that's worth a lot and it's also more urgent. So you may decide that studying for the midterm is what you're going to do first because it's actually of high importance and high urgency. You've got a reflection due in 5 days, and that's worth 10%. Maybe you decide to do that next because actually it's something that you can probably get done fairly quickly and it has a high value and it's coming up due. Now, the research essay and the chapter quiz. Which would you do next? You can decide different ways. If you decide on the chapter quiz, again, if you've been keeping up with your reading and you've been going to class and taking notes every day, you may decide that you actually don't need to do anything to prepare for that chapter quiz tomorrow. It's only worth 2%. So if you think about how much your time is worth, if you've been keeping up with the class, maybe there's nothing you need to do. Or maybe you only need to spend 30 minutes reviewing. Because it's only worth 2% and you have higher value things coming up very quickly, that chapter quiz should only take like 2% of your time. It should not be taking, do not be spending 15 hours studying for a 2% quiz. That's not a good use of your time. You've got other things that are more valuable. So you might decide, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes reviewing for that quiz, and then I'm moving on. Now, the research essay, even though it's high importance, so it's very valuable, it's low urgency. So you might work on it after you've studied for your midterm, or you might decide to do it later and not bother working on it until after your midterm is done. And again, you don't have to do the entire thing. You might decide, okay, I'm going to study for my midterm, I'm going to take a break, and then I'm going to decide on my research topic. Or then I'm going to go and find 2 articles that I can use for my research paper. You can break it up into smaller bits so you get a little bit done at a time without overwhelming you. That's how you can use the priority matrix. So, for priority setting in real life, other things you can do to help you is before you go to bed each night, decide what your priority for tomorrow will be and write it down. So put it on a sticky note, stick it on your computer monitor or your desktop, whatever you want, but somewhere where you'll see it right away. Think about what you'll need in order to accomplish this priority. So are there books? Do you need an internet connection? Is there a group meeting involved? So you need to arrange with others when you're going to be doing things. Make sure you have that all ready. That way, when you wake up, you can review your priority. Because sometimes what happens is, as we sleep or we think about things overnight, we realize Actually, you know what? I've done some of that studying already. I've decided it's actually more important that I do this other thing right now. But you've thought about it and you're prepared. So you've thought about, is this still accurate or has something changed? But either way, knowing what is most important helps make it happen. And deciding the night before gives you the starting point of a plan for putting it into practice the next day. So let's talk about planning tools you can use to make sure things happen. Well, when I'm talking about planning, which is more important to plan, your schoolwork or fun? Now, most of us as students, we might be inclined to say schoolwork, but it's actually important to plan both because if you don't plan both, the chances are good that one or the other of them will not happen. So keep time in your schedule for both schoolwork and fun. And think about how much time you do have. So, we talked about the years of your life you're going to spend sleeping. If you say you have 168 hours a week, about 33%, if you're getting a healthy amount of sleep, a third of your time is going to be spent sleeping. Now, if you have, say, 15 hours of class per week, which is average in North American universities, learning experts suggest that you should be spending 2 hours of out of class time studying for every 1 hour of in class time. So that means if you have 15 hours of class, that's 30 hours of studying that you're going to be doing. So that adds up to 45 hours a week. That's a full time job. And that's the kind of time commitment you need to be thinking about making in order to be the most successful you can at university. You're going to have other things taking time. So you might spend a lot of time eating, and that eating includes cooking time. Hopefully, you'll spend time having fun. You'll have time doing chores, and then other. So there are still some hours left in the day. You might have family come in. You might be running errands, that sort of thing. But you can see that actually a lot of your time, when you look just at sleep and classes, how much of the pie is gone. So, one of the best things you can do is start by making a monthly schedule and putting it somewhere where you're going to see it every day. So, you can find a blank monthly calendar at og.ualberta.ca/month calendar and start filling it in. So, fill in things like when it's reading week or when the university is closed because you're less likely to be able to get a response from your professors during those times. Put in other things like student success workshops, when you might be going to that, when you've got assignments, major assignments or exams, you want to put those in there. But also put in fun events like when your friend's birthday is that you're going to be celebrating. Have the big events and deadlines on your monthly schedule and keep it on hand because it gives you a big picture of what's coming up. You know when you're going to be crowded for time and when you're going to have a lot. So, for example, this English essay that's due on the 3rd, you've actually got 2 weeks before it with no major deadlines. So, you could spend a lot of that time then working on your essay and not even start worrying about it until after your midterm. You also want to make a weekly schedule. So put in the times when your classes are taking place. Now, as we're remote, things might have shifted. So there might be no set time that you have to uh, go to a workshop, but it's worth making a schedule for yourself because it just helps. The more consistent you are with your schedule, the more likely you are to actually get things done. So put in a time of day when you're going to be working on your psych class, for example, or biology or math. Put in times of day when you're going to be eating. You're more likely to do it if it's scheduled and you don't want to miss important things like eating or exercise. You can see this schedule has fun with friends in it. Work is listed in it. Always include your work schedule whenever you make a weekly schedule. And then start filling in when you're going to study your different subjects. So it can be really helpful to study right after class. But if you have another class immediately after it, that's obviously not possible. This schedule has just scheduled 1 hour for every 1 hour of study for every in-hour class hour. Um, but really, you should be planning more than this. But this is just an example. So we've got times for studying biology, when we're going to write up our biology lab, studying English, and basically you've got it filled out, but it's not completely filled out. So there's still times when you can do things or do nothing. So when you make your schedule, it's important to make your schedule work for you. You can find a blank weekly schedule at aug.ualberta.ca/weekly schedule. And you'll notice from the sample we looked at, you always leave free time. Okay, things come up. Sometimes something takes longer than you expect. Leaving yourself wiggle room means you're more likely to stick to a schedule. You also want to know how and when you work most effectively. So if you're a morning person, maybe you want to schedule your studying for the morning. If you're a night person, maybe you want to do more of it later in the afternoon or evening because that's when you're most effective. You also want to be prepared to adjust your schedule. So this example we looked at, this isn't written in stone. If you realize, I've said I'm going to study math right after that class, but actually by the end of class, all I want to do is go take a break, go walk around outside. That's okay. Adjust it so that it works for you. Also, don't spend more time making your schedule than actually organizing or completing your work. Okay, it can be fun, especially if you start color coding it and getting everything set up, but you don't want it to take any more time than it has to because you need your time for other work. Watch out for time wasters. So you could probably guess from when we looked at the how many years of your life, what some of the big time wasters are. In fact, I'm going to ask you right now, how many of you have your phone in your hand or on your desk beside you or in your pocket? Probably most of us. Actually, when I asked this, 100% of people had their phones like within inches of them. Our phones can be our best friends and our worst enemies because they can be a source of a lot of distraction. So they could be where we engage in social media. Social media is can be really fun, but it can also just be really distracting and it can pull you away from what's important and what will help you accomplish your goals. It can also get you caught up in focusing on other people's lives rather than your own. Video games or any kind of games. I play solitaire on my phone. So, one of the things I do when I'm working is have the volume off on my phone always, reduce the number of notifications, and in fact, usually I have it either in my pocket or turned upside down because it's so distracting to have notifications or to know that solitaire or whatever game I'm playing, mahjong, is just a hand reach away. Games are good as a reward, but if you have easy access to them, they become distractors. They're also they give you a hit of dopamine. And if you're engaging in that kind of activity frequently, you're actually going to find you're doing your schoolwork that you need to be successful. That's actually going to become less and less rewarding. So, the less frequently you do things like engage in social media, play games, watch TV, those sort of high dopamine hits, the less often you do them, the more interesting and rewarding you're actually going to find doing your work. So if you use them as a reward at the end of the day, it's going to make it easier to get things done throughout the day. Now, some time wasters are not external things, they're actually internal things. So waiting for inspiration, think, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to wait until I have a great idea of what I'm going to do for my paper, or the feeling I'm feeling inspired. That's when I'm going to go do work on something. But that feeling is, if we wait for that to occur naturally, then we're going to spend more time waiting than actually doing. New ideas are the result of work and action. So if you wait for inspiration, you're going to wait a long time. Whereas actually, if you start doing, usually once you start doing, you start feeling more inspired. You know that feeling of getting on a roll. So you're actually getting stuff done and inspiration will start to come. But whether it comes or not, it still needs doing. Procrastination, that's a big one. That's a big thing that's a time waster. So often, procrastination comes from a fear of failing at an assignment or not knowing where to begin. So, again, this is why you have a plan, because if you have a plan for when and how you're going to do something, it can help you avoid procrastinating and it can be a motivator. So, don't let that fear or insecurity stop you from actually getting the work done. You will feel better for having done something. Now, sometimes complaining is a time waster. We get so overwhelmed with everything that we have to do, we may sound off to our friends or family or whoever and complain about what we have to do. But the fact is that complaining actually accomplishes nothing and it usually makes us feel worse about the situation. It makes the negatives larger and the positives smaller. So if you need to blow off steam and rant, give yourself a little time to do it and then move on and realize, okay, it doesn't matter if this is difficult. I have to get moving anyway. Comparing yourself to others. Now, this could be a big time waster and a demotivator. And sometimes this happens as a result of looking at what others are posting on social media. We can start to think, oh, that person is so brilliant, or that person they say they're done their essay already and I'm not even started. First of all, we when those thoughts about, oh, so and so is smarter than me, so and so understands this better, so and so doesn't have to study in order to get a good grade, those thoughts in our head distract us and prevent us from getting started. And they're also usually not accurate because we don't really know what other people are doing. So focus on what you can do yourself because your perceptions are probably inaccurate and it can leave you feeling jealous or insecure and ending up doing nothing. So you can take a moment when you find yourself starting down that road, pull yourself back and say, you know what, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. I have work that I need to do. And the final time waster is perfectionism. Perfectionism is the enemy of good, effective time management because it leads us to edit and fine tune and fix things more than we actually spend time creating them. So if you find that you do 2 hours of writing and then a half hour or hour of rewriting, that perfectionism is really getting in the way of you completing the task. So try to pull back the time you spend editing things because, of course, you could edit or rewrite for all eternity and still not think it's perfect. Perfect is not like trying to achieve perfect means you will never get anything done. So, one thing to bear in mind, Facebook's motto is that done is better than perfect. And that's a good motto to keep in mind as you're going through school. Focus on getting things done, focus on excellence if you want to, but forget about perfection. So, what are some application tools you can use to help be more efficient and effective? Well, Make a to-do list. So there's different ways you can do this. I have a pad of yellow legal paper that I like to write down my to-do list on. Um, some people like to put stickies on their computer screen and pull them off as they get things done. Some people might find that distracting and just use a traditional to-do list. But you can also either on your phone use the to-do app or task list app, or in Gmail, Google Calendar, there's a task list that you can pull down. So this on the right is an example of mine. And you can add things as you need to do them. You can check them off as you get them done. And you can help track your progress and remind yourself, oh, right, this is what I need to be working on next. So use technology to plan. As I said, your phone is your friend. So set reminders of when you're going to work on stuff or when things are due, and set them early so that you're thinking about them ahead of time and preparing for them. Schedule things in Google Calendar or on your phone so you know when you're doing what. A lot of events are now coming as invites, calendar invites. So taking advantage of your phone's capacity really makes sense. And making sure you're putting your class schedule into your phone as well is helpful. Create task lists in your phone or on Google so that you can check things off as you do them. And then there are programs like Monday.com. So if you Google time management apps, you'll find a lot of answers. This is one example. Monday.com, you can create task lists. It's really great for group work because if you're working with other people, you can assign different tasks to different people through Monday.com, and you can say, okay, group member number one, you're doing this. Group number two, you're doing that. Member number three, you're doing that, and I'm doing this. And then if you have to pass something over to someone else, you can assign it to them as well. You can leave a comment. It's a really good way of managing who's doing what when. But there are other systems as well. This is just an example. Another thing to help you apply good time management is what we call eating the frog. Okay, this does not mean actually eating a frog. This comes from American author Mark Twain, who said, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. So, that thing that you find difficult or that you're dreading, that you really don't want to do, get it over with. You'll feel better. So, do that thing first thing when you get up. Now, you're actually at your most alert and your brain is most active 1 hour after you get up. Even if you're not a morning person, as I am not, um, you still that's sort of peak performance time. So get up, give yourself an hour to have breakfast, shower, do whatever it is you need to do, and about an hour later, that's the optimal time to tackle that difficult thing. Getting tough stuff done first frees up your time and energy, and it also gives you that immediate sense of accomplishment. So even if you spent 3 hours on that tough thing, once you've done that 3 hours of work, even if you get nothing else done that day, you can have a huge sense of accomplishment for the difficult thing that you managed to get some work done on. Another system, if that seems too intimidating, you can consider is the Pomodoro technique. So the Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. The person who came up with it loves tomatoes, and so that's why he called it that. But it's a time management system. So you can look it up online, pomodorotechnique.com. And basically, what it says is give yourself 25 minutes to work on something. So if you've said, okay, I'm going to be doing my reading for this course right now, set a timer for 25 minutes and then start with whatever it is you're going to do. When the timer goes off, give yourself a 5-minute break. Now, some people vary these times, but actually, one of the good things about the 25-minute time is that that's sort of when our natural attention span starts to wane after about 20 minutes. So give yourself a 5-minute break and then keep track of what you got done to see how long it takes you to complete different tasks you're working on. So you do one Pomodoro's worth of work and realize, oh, I only got a third of the way through that chapter I was going to read. So see how many it actually takes you. And if you discover, okay, it's actually three 25 minutes uh, time periods that I need in order to complete a chapter reading, now you know how you need to schedule your time in order to complete that task. One good tool you can use as well is the 1 hour project tool. And again, you can find that at aug.ualberta.ca/1 hour project. And it's a tool you can use when you go to sit down and work on some assignments to evaluate what you got done in your hour, how well your system is working for you, and things you might be able to do to improve. Another option is the 3+2 rule. So, this rule says that basically you can only do three big things and two small things in any given day. So choose three important and time consuming things and two small things to do today, and write each thing on its own index card. Big things take 2 to 3 hours. And if you have a 3 hour class that day, then maybe that's one of your big things. Small things take around less than 20 minutes. So maybe it's running to the library to pick up or drop off your books, something like that. So, as I said, write each one on an index card. And then you can see how many of them you got done in a day. Now, the great thing about having them on separate index cards is if you find you don't get through all of them, you rip up and throw out the ones you did get done, but keep the ones you still have to do. And again, if you're using the prioritization tool, you may look at some things and realize, actually, that doesn't matter. I don't need to do that anymore. You may cross it out and put something else on it, but you can keep track of how much you get done in a day. And maybe you'll discover that actually you can only do two big and one small things in a given day. This helps you evaluate what you can actually accomplish. And it may vary. A weekday versus a weekend day, there might be quite different. But if you want some more time management strategies, you can check out this website, toggle.com/blog/ the ultimate guide to time management strategies. There's some really good examples there. Finally, always evaluate. We've talked about this before, um, but it's you constantly need to evaluate how well things are working for you. So you can find a study schedule analyzer. This is like the 1 hour project. If you go to aug.ualberta.ca/study schedule, you can find this tool that will help you figure out um, how well you're using your time and whether your study schedule is working for you. So, you also want to keep in mind your ultimate goal for the semester. That was the starting point for all your time management planning. That led you to come up with the plan to get your goal accomplished. Then you're going to evaluate how well the plan is working for you and maybe adjust it if necessary. And that adjustment is again just going to feed back into your goal. So, this is something you're going to do regularly, not just one time. So, what happens if the plan falls apart? You make the perfect plan, it's going well, and then suddenly everything goes off the rails. Well, first of all, ask yourself, do you leave things undone? So, do you just start something and never finish it? That's actually another big time waster, unfinished tasks. Um, Ideally, whatever you start, you finish. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to finish a 20-page research paper in one day, but the little task you've given yourself to do on any given day, Did you get that task done? If you're not getting those things done, well, maybe you need to break them into smaller pieces, or maybe need to adjust your schedule so that you've got the time you need or that you're breaking it up so your attention stays engaged. Have you not planned enough? So, did you just say, yeah, I'm going to study tonight, but had no plan or schedule for what exactly you were going to do with that time? Usually, if that happens, you say, oh, I'm going to study tonight, but you don't have a way of doing it. At the end of the night, you can't even tell what you got done, if anything, and it will always be less than you hoped you would do. Are you trying to do too much? It can be easy as a student to overcommit. So you've got classes that are going on, and the workload starts to increase as we get further into the semester. You may have joined clubs or gone on student government. If you're spreading yourself too thin, drop some of the things that are expendable. So think about, is this something I actually have to be doing right now? Is this something I would love to do, but now is not the time? You can always draw back. Are time wasters taking over? So do you find you're always reaching for your phone, no matter what? Okay, put your phone in a different room. The world will not end if you don't look at your phone for an hour. The world will continue to revolve. Use it as a reward. Or if you're trying to study in front of the TV, okay, it's going to distract you guaranteed. Move where you're studying to a place where you can be more successful. Are you having a personal crisis? Now, this is important because these things happen. Sometimes you're working great and then something major happens. You break up with the person you're dating, something happens within your family, you get sick or have an accident, and suddenly it doesn't matter what the schedule was like. This personal crisis takes over your time and your energy. If that happens, there are things you can do. So you can talk to your academic advisor, let them know what happens, and get their advice on what to do. You can talk to a counselor, get their support to help you through the crisis. You can talk to your professors. Now, you may not want to tell everyone your story, and that's fine. You don't have to, but you can talk to people who will advocate for you. If it's a health crisis, your professors can help accommodate that. So maybe you delay your final until you've recovered enough to do it. You may decide to withdraw from certain courses because you just can't manage the full course load. That's fine. If you're taking 9 or more credits in a semester, you're considered full time. So there is some wiggle room there. But think about what you need to do to take care of yourself and get the support you need to do that. So, some final thoughts. Know what works for you. I've suggested a few time management systems, but there are a lot more out there, and I encourage you to look for them. And don't worry about if what someone else is doing and says is the best system ever doesn't work for you. Not everything is going to work, just like not every piece of clothing you try on is going to fit. Use the ones that fit and throw out the ones that don't. Love it or leave it. Work smart, not just hard. So if you hear someone say, oh, I spent 17 hours studying for that exam last night, that does not mean that those 17 hours were well spent. Okay, nobody can pay attention for that long, and it probably means they skipped out on sleep, which is really bad for you. And it does not going to lead to greater success, probably. So figure out how to do things efficiently rather than just spending more time on them. Always leave time for fun. Your brain needs a break. Getting up and giving yourself a break actually gives your brain time to process what it's learned, to make connections to other things you've learned, and to just let that information soak into your memory. You actually need to give your brain a break in order to do that. And finally, reward yourself. When you get those difficult things done, literally give yourself a pat on the back, okay? Because touch makes us feel better. When you finish an exam or a major paper, Go celebrate with friends, go out for dinner, or just go for a walk, whatever you need to do. But do something nice from yourself because that's a big accomplishment and you should be proud of it. Well, thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions or if you'd like a copy of the presentation, you can email me at augar@ualberta.ca. If you'd like to book a one-on-one student success appointment, or if you want to sign up for more workshops, you can go to calendly.com/augar and sign up for any of the workshops we offer throughout the semester. What we have coming up is practical ways to manage your stress. That's the next one. How to stay motivated in online courses. Doing everything remotely makes it completely different from the in person experience. So, I'm going to be talking more about motivation, taking notes and kicking butt. So, being a good note taker, getting the most from your textbook. If you're reading your textbook from cover to cover, you're doing it wrong. You're spending more time reading than you need to. There are better ways of doing it. Exam Writing 101, how to prepare for and write exams. Tips and tricks to improve your memory. And finally, just before final exams, keep calm and ace your finals. So I hope to see you at future workshops, and I thank you for joining me now. Have a great semester.